Good evening. I'm Normaira Perez. I'm part of a group called A Call to Action on Puerto Rico, Un llamado a la acción por Puerto Rico. We are here tonight to talk about, of course, we are going to talk about Maria. That is what's going on right now in Puerto Rico. But we have planned a presentation about Peñuelas because people is asking us about Peñuelas and what's going on in Peñuelas. But in general, it's not about Peñuelas. It's the environmental colonialism that we are suffering in our country. So since 1898. So that's why I'm here. In my company, we have Judy. Judy is the president of the New York
State Nurses
Association. So you want to introduce yourself, Judy?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Judy Sheridan Gonzalez. I'm a registered nurse, emergency room nurse, Bronx, Montefiore Medical Center. Been an ER nurse for over 30 years. And recently our group won leadership of our union about 6 years ago, and we've been in the process of transforming our union into a social justice union. We're very involved with climate issues and just general issues around social justice. So I prepared this PowerPoint to discuss environmental colonialism. We've heard about environmental justice and environmental racism. This is another form of environmental racism and injustice, environmental colonialism. It's important to contextualize what's going on today in Puerto Rico. As a colony, first Spain and then the United States for over 100 years, it's basically been a source of plunder. That is the role of colonies, and certainly Puerto Rico has played that role. Many of us are familiar with the struggle in Vieques, and it's very important to see the history of what's gone on and why we are facing what we're really facing today with a lot of these hurricanes and the lack of infrastructure to accommodate. Dumping, there's been toxic dumping throughout the island. There's been a big protest. Remember, the people in Puerto Rico are not accepting these issues point blank, and they are protesting and fighting against all this toxicity. All this dumps now with the hurricane that just occurred, this has actually entered the land, entered the soil, entered the air, and entered the water. Our biggest fear has actually come true. Next slide. And probably in this audience, people know I did prepare this PowerPoint for mixed audiences who may not be aware of the role of the vulture funds and the hedge funds in bankrupting Puerto Rico. They bought up debt, these were investments, and they're demanding that they get their money back. Next slide. Which introduces us to the age of austerity, magnified tremendously in Puerto Rico because of its colonial status. Because of laws in this constitution, the hedge funds must be paid before monies can be spent on the people of Puerto Rico. So that's damaged the infrastructure terribly. Water supply, the electrical system, which doesn't exist right now, roads, transportation, are all suffering. We're suffering before the latest hurricane. Next slide. And people are protesting. There's been huge protests across the island, bringing many coalitions and forces together, demanding that the debt be canceled, that the debt is unreasonable, that the debt is immoral. Next slide. We have to place this in this global context of global warming that's happening all over the world, and it's well understood by scientists that the global north, which the United States mainland is part of, is the cause of a lot of this global warming by the burning of fossil fuels, but it's the global south that suffered the most dire effects. Next slide. I'm not sure how many people remember in 2015 the sequía, the horrible drought that affected Puerto Rico, the worst in its history. Next slide. Where fertile lands became wastelands with cracked up soil, plants dying, and people actually not having water. Next slide. As a result, there was terrible water restrictions, some cities not having water for 5 days of the week. Again, the infrastructure was poor, it couldn't be accommodated. And what do people do when they don't have water? They try to create cisterns and other ways of collecting rainwater and other water, and that leads to vectors, mosquitoes. And we saw the rise of chikungunya, Zika, and these other infections. Next slide. In understanding climate change, it's important to understand the role of carbon dioxide and also methane, which is far more poisonous, and its polluting effect on the earth. And having to explain from what we call the climate deniers, who are in control of a lot of our economy right now, it's important to understand the science. So just a brief talk about the science. Next slide. So this carbon dioxide was sequestered into the ground 350 million years ago when the dinosaurs died out. And all of our ecosystems and the evolution of mankind occurred in a different kind of climate than what we're actually going to. Because a lot of people say, well, we had the Ice Age, we had climate change is real. We said, well, in 350 million years, that's okay. But in 60 years or 70 years, it's not okay. Next slide. Just a simple understanding of the greenhouse effect. Most people have heard of the greenhouse effect. They don't understand the role of carbon dioxide and methane within it. And it's, again, we need to arm ourselves with knowledge if we're going to argue our point. And as these sun rays go into the earth, they get radiated off. But when you increase these burning of fossil fuels, it allows this carbon dioxide, methane, nitrogen to block those rays from returning so the earth warms up. Very simple when you think about it and look at it that way. Next slide. But look at the impact. In only 30 years, half of the Arctic ice shelf has been destroyed. Glaciers are calving. So what does that do? It raises the level of water in our oceans. It desalinates them. It changes all those ecosystems. But the biggest issue is much more moisture is in the water. The water levels are higher. Lowlands such as Bangladesh, Florida, and many, many islands. Vanuatu, I think, is almost completely under. This unusual, and this is before Maria. We had 4 major hurricanes in the Atlantic that were category 3 and above at the same time. This is pretty much unprecedented. So when people say, well, climate change doesn't cause hurricanes, that's true. But the intensity, the velocity, and the dangers of the hurricanes are intensified because of climate change. Next slide. And that is Irma. That's the eye of Irma, bigger than the state of Florida. And that we thought that was our biggest fear at one point. But next slide. In Puerto Rico, the infrastructure for electricity was so poor that even though Irma just touched the island, electricity went out for everybody in all those areas and didn't come back even before Maria came in many of the parts of the island. Because of this austerity, because of the relationship with the hedge funds, electricity was a mess. Next slide. Look at the size of the hurricane and look at the size of Puerto Rico. The devastation on the island was complete. Next slide. This is just a typical scene that we've all seen with horror. I mean, I think after the first 2 days we had to stop looking at the pictures. Next slide. So these are some scenes. Animal carcasses floating down waterways. Deforestation completely, 80-90% of the island completely deforested. The power lines are like jokes. And of course, we've heard of the dam in Lake, well, even the children. Now there's a history, I'm going to go briefly through the history. This is the Cordillera Central. 50 years ago, there was an attempt to do strip mining there, which would have destroyed this entire area. And there was a huge struggle. In Puerto Rico, the environmental struggle to save the environment is very much linked to the anti-colonial struggle. That's not necessarily the case here in the United States. Next slide. And just so you see what water looks like, now what these strip minings would do would create toxins in the water supply, and destroy the water for most of the population that was fed by that area. And I think 25% of the water supply would have come from those areas for the north of Puerto Rico. This is what water looks like after it's contaminated. This is a real picture of a water supply that's contaminated. And I don't think anyone here would want to drink that water on the right. Next slide. So Casa Pueblo, we gave birth to Casa Pueblo. Alexis Massol, an engineer there, led the struggle of the community to fight a lot of the strip mining. That struggle was won. That stopped happening. And in Adjuntas, this Casa Pueblo was founded, which played a major role later on. Next slide. Just to illustrate what happens, again, knowing the science, so we can explain it. This is fracking, where is also fracking creates natural gas, which they say is clean. It is not clean. This is what happens when you have to frack this natural gas. These toxins go into the ground, it enters the bedrock, it goes into the aquifers and goes into the del Norte, which was cynically called Via Verde, which was to create this beautiful way of bringing this clean, safe, natural gas from the north of the island down south. Once again, next slide. Big struggle against that. A lot of people joined in and got international recognition. Next slide. People engaged in civil disobedience, and I think that we have to do a lot more civil and uncivil disobedience in this age that we're in. Many demonstrations occurred in both the United States and in Puerto Rico. Next slide. And significant significant in Puerto Rico, some of the unions who are not supporting our climate struggles here in the United States, because of the understanding of the nature of colonialism, the UTL and other unions were supportive of that struggle. Next slide. And of course, we won that struggle. The gasoducto, after much, was defeated. Yeah. So before Vieques, their military actually had occupied almost all of Culebra. They had depopulated most of the island and attempted to completely move everyone out of the island, which is frightening. That was a big struggle. Next slide. And through a series of activities, the military had to back down and said they'll move their military activities to somewhere else. Well, guess where they moved them to? Next slide. They took over most of the island of Vieques and contaminated that island. Because remember, when they do their exercises, they leave the detritus on the island and it destroys the soil and causes much cancer. Viequenses have higher rates of cancer and many other diseases, asthma, than the rest of the island. Next slide. And again, through struggles that called for international attention, many arrests, much civil disobedience. Next slide. The Navy was forced out, but again, the devolution that's needed to clean up the environment did not occur. Fishing industry was destroyed. There are live mines still, and lots of military evidence left. Next slide. And this is just some documentation on the public health impacts. As nurses, what we've tried to do, again, in our union, because nurses might say, well, why do you care about climate? Why do you even care about Puerto Rico? That's not about nursing. We've tried to hook up our interest in healthcare to these other issues that are affecting our population. It's very important if we're going to win any struggle to make sure that people make connections, and we try to make those connections. Next slide. What I find, sadly, many people are not aware of the role of the pharmaceutical companies in Puerto Rico. We're trying to teach our young people history. Next slide. This is the net effect of the use of pharmaceuticals and the exploitation of our people. Look at these salaries. It's amazing to think that people can live on that kind of a salary. Next slide. And what many people don't know is that birth control pills were tested on women of Puerto Rico in the 50s and 60s so that they could be made safe. This is like Tuskegee. And without any kind of moral compunction, 1/3 of all Puerto Rican women were sterilized without their informed consent. The operation was so common, it was colaboración. And there were many struggles against exposing that, and unfortunately many of our people don't understand the role of eugenics and colonialism. Next slide. And of course, with the pharmaceutical industry getting all these breaks, it set up a lot of factories in the island, and the waste disposal of these pharmaceuticals have poisoned other things in the island. These are just many other struggles that are going on that are ambiental, that are environmental. The incinerator, Narecibo, the struggle to keep the beaches clean and belonging to the people, and fumigation and so forth. And Norma will talk more about the cenizas, nothing to mention. But next slide, I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you next slide. Next slide. Next slide. So one of the results of colonialism is an incredible increase in poverty and unemployment. And when you have poverty, unemployment, and no services, you're going to have some violence, especially among our youth. There's a lot of gang violence in the caseríos and in the poorer communities, and resulting in murders and deaths and gun violence. So just to show you how disgusting some of these people are. Next slide. So something was floated by that Puerto Rico would be perfect for medical tourism. And what they said was that they could make it a transplant mecca because there are so many young, healthy organs from all the deaths of these youths. This was published, and there was a lot of reaction against it, so they kind of dropped that really quickly. But that actually did happen. There was a thought that could just unbelievable, right? Next slide. Mm-hmm. And of course, you know, the plan, and we are very concerned about this disaster capitalist plan that we think, because of the hurricane, could be implemented. You know, turning the island, forcing migration out and turning the island into a tourist mecca with everybody enslaved working for the tourist industry. Next slide. And asthma and air pollution doesn't just affect Latinos in Puerto Rico. The Latino community in this country is also much more likely to die from asthma. Next slide. This is the Cross Bronx Expressway. Next slide. And as you can see, in the Bronx and in El Barrio and in Harlem, that's where we have our highest rates of asthma. That's where incinerators are, that's where toxics are, and where the dumping goes and where we have pollution. Next slide. This is a protest, one of the things we're trying to do is link a lot of the fights, because again, alone we're not going to win this battle against these people, and many of us were involved. We were there in Dakota fighting that pipeline. Next slide. And the violence against people there is very similar to the violence here. That woman on the right, the bottom right, is a woman whose arm was blown out. She's a 21-year-old EMT from a concussion grenade. Freezing water in the freezing cold, and I was there, it is cold there. And dogs, next slide. Not that dissimilar to what we see in Puerto Rico with the choque. Next slide. So this is a graphic. I'm not going to waste your time with that. I don't like reading things, but these are all the different examples that we show. This is something we give out to our nurses to show the impact of climate change, particularly in poor communities and marginalized communities, how it affects health and why it affects us as nurses. Next slide. And we try to point out to who our common enemies are. Everyone here knows about the Koch brothers? Mm-hmm. One of them owns part of one of our hospitals, New York Presbyterian, so we've been able to make that connection. These are the people who are the climate deniers. These are the people poisoning our planet. These are the people exploiting us on the job and in our communities. Next slide. Next. Oops. So, this is how we can get our nurses to fight against climate change, something that never happened before. And unfortunately, very few unions are involved. We're trying to organize other unions to get more involved in the climate. Next slide. Also making links around after Charlottesville, around social justice. Again, making links for our members around gun violence and what happens with racism and white supremacy. Next slide. And DACA, we had nurses. We actually led the march. This was a funny, another story for you. Okay, next slide. And now we have Maria. Next slide. Oh, I did put it in. Oh, I thought I put it earlier. Okay, moving on. Did I show this before?
Yes.
I did. Sorry. I haven't slept in a week.
Yes, all these have received.
Oh, you see it again. And what we did as a result, we established what we call the New York Recovery Network. We had done disaster work before, and now we have already over 80 volunteers, nurses to go. We're going to go in medical teams to Puerto Rico. We have to work with the government to do and save our planet and save our people. That's next slide. Over.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Judy, for this great. I think you was trying to connect everything, because we need to have an idea that this is connected with everything. Global warming, what happened in PR is related with this. What's going on here with our communities, that we have the amount of people with asthma and diseases is happening in PR, but you know it here. People in the U.S., they don't even know what's going on in Puerto Rico. People don't even know that we are citizens. So, but this is not about citizenship. It's about the human. We are humans, no? Before, I'm Norma Hiram Perez. I'm part of a call to action on Puerto Rico. This is our second time talking about Peñuelas. The forum is called Peñuelas Focus on Environmental Colonialism. And we need to say Peñuelas because now Peñuelas on the target. But before Peñuelas, it was a gasoducto. And before it was Vieques. And every time we have something that is related with environment. But in PR, as Judy say, the fight, when we try to solve these problems are not only our problem, it's someone else that is making decision. Someone else who's trying to sell our land and decide what they want to do with our land. And even though we live in New York, Puerto Rico is our land. So if we need to have that ownership, that as our land, this is our people that we need to support. So the idea of this forums is to educate people. We protest, we do social media, we always try to have a press release denouncing, saying what we try to, saying in the US, but we need to educate the people with data, with information that is reliable, from people that you can trust. Yes?
So I think what Norma's talking about, education, is really important. When we marched in the parade, because we had done a lot of education for our members. We had 100 nurses marching in the parade with shirts and messages against the promesa. And I can't tell you how many young people, second generation Puerto Ricans, who said, "What's promesa? What are you talking? Why is everybody wearing these shirts? Why is the flag black? Why are you doing this?" We had no idea how many people just didn't even know what promesa was. You know, people knew probably who's on American Idol, but they don't know about promesa. So the education piece is really critical, and the linking to other struggles. I just came back from a weekend at a conference called Labor Network for Sustainability. It was labor unions concerned about the climate, and I met people from Black Workers for Social Justice working in North Carolina, fighting toxic ash, fighting the same struggles that we're fighting. People from West Virginia fighting these same struggles. These struggles are going on everywhere. And we were able to share our information, and because the hurricane had just occurred, we passed a hat and we collected over $1,000 from people's pockets to send to relief efforts there. So it's really important to make links with people so that we can support each other in our mutual struggles.
The politicians, you can see on the news, talking about what's going on, doing press release, the mayor doing a press release, and then the government the next day is doing another press release, just to show the power, who's going to help more in Puerto Rico. And the reality is that they are not getting nothing from the states, from even the people that support different cities in the island. So Peñuelas and focus on environmental colonialism, and we can change it after Maria, the same title, because it's the same situation. With Promesa, everything that is happening in our communities. So we want to share, we are sharing the information on our call to action Facebook page, because these is the people that we want to send the money, and because I know for sure that they are going to help the people in Puerto Rico. Also, the Federación de Maestros is not only, the money is not only for the Federación de Maestros. It's like an umbrella of different organizations, grassroots organizations like Urbe a Pie, Nin Negrón, even Se Acabaron las Promesas, Comedores Sociales, that they are doing a great job feeding our students in the University of Puerto Rico in different campus. So that's why we are supporting these two groups. Next. So I'm gonna read it for him from here. So struggle for environmental justice have become a fundamental part of Puerto Rican social, political, and anti-colonial mobilizations. It's kind of different when we are in a groups here against situations. In PR, in Puerto Rico, it's like a combination of we are fighting for our health, we are fighting because we don't want to destroy our environment, but it's something else, and it's the imperialism. Next. So I'm gonna show you a couple of pictures, Paseo Caribe project. A lot of people forgot about Paseo Caribe, and if you go to Old San Juan now, and you go very close to El Condado, you have a huge development in front, very close to Hotel Caribe Hilton. We had a lot of protests. That is part of the Maritimo Coast. You are not supposed to develop that area. They did it. So a lot of money, it was paid. A lot of protests will happen, but they won. In this case, they won. They built all the hotels and apartments there. Next one. Gasoducto, as Yuri mentioned. Look at the right picture. That's part of one of our beautiful mountains, how they destroy it just for the gas pipeline. The good thing that we won, so they didn't construct it, but they always have that on plan, so we need to be aware. Next. Playas Pa'l Pueblo. Playas Pa'l Pueblo, that's another group. They fought against the Marriott Courtyard. The Marriott Courtyard is a big hotel. This is a chain of hotels in the U.S. They want to add more parking lot. So we had a lot of compañeros and compañeras, and look like the La Reserva, sorry, I'm not standing. In 2005, how was that area? And look at 2014. So they won, they stay there, but right now after Maria, they're struggling and they need to rebuild and like the whole country. Next. Vieques, you know about Vieques, and we're still fighting because they didn't clean, they didn't do their part. A lot of people are still sick. They don't have the health insurance or even a hospital to get the health care. Next. Vieques, civil disobedience. Next. So Peñuelas. Peñuelas, I'm gonna try to be, very summarize everything that I did in the previous presentation. Peñuelas in the south part of Puerto Rico. It looks like it was not part of the hurricane, but if you remember Judy's picture of the hurricane, of course, it was kind of in the middle of the hurricane, and we have a mountain of ashes there waiting for the hurricane. What happened with those ashes? They say that they're still there. I don't think so. Next. So before talking about Peñuelas with more details, I divide this presentation, this area in 4 parts related with the social development of Puerto Rico and how the U.S. pushed us to change the way to develop. So before the United States invade us, we had different, not a monocultivo, that we call it monocrops or monocultures. We had different type of cultures. That is very good for the soils to be very fertile. When the United States invade us, they make a decision to have sugarcane as the main industry, quotation mark. So monoculture. So it was like the first, it's part of the problem that we have in some of our soils in the north part and even in the south part of the Puerto Rico. That happens in Haiti. So that happens in different countries. So they made the decision, we didn't make the decisions. The azucareros were the ones who took care of everything. And if we think about Pedro Albizu Campos, he was part of the lawyer who was supporting the sugarcane workers when they had a big strike. So monoculture and the way that we change how to use our agricultural lands, it was part of the U.S. decision. Next one. Next, I need to divide in, and we can add more information, but we don't have enough time to talk about all these details. I can share the information from where I get this. Then we have the industrialization, Operation Bootstrap, Manos a la Obra. It sounds very nice, Manos a la Obra. That guy, everybody, I know a lot of people, some people are gonna be very mad at me, but he was part of that big problem that we have in terms of Manos a la Obra. They moved the agriculture, they decide not to do more crops in different areas that they were, that was the industry in that days, to create like a big industrial zone. And I mentioned Corco because La Corco industry next, and actually, I'm sorry, go back, I'm sorry. That is La Corco, that is an industry from refining oil. It covers Peñuelas and Guayanilla. So if we have problems with Peñuelas right now, it's not only the ashes that they are putting in the landfill. It started with the Corco. And before the Corco, Peñuela has their own agricultural industry, if we want to say it that way. Next. So that's the Corco. Corco, it was established in Peñuelas and Guayanilla. It started in 1954, so after the Constitution, the ELA Constitution, and it was closed in 1982. 1.25 square mile of land wasted. Right now, we do have just some tanks that they are using to put some oil, to save some oil. I heard today in the news, in the radio station, that they want to electrify that area because they can put diesel there to storage the diesel that they're going to use to fulfill the hospitals and all of that. And I mean, I'm not sure. I don't know if that is the right way to go. But that's what I heard today in the radio station in WKQ. Next one. After industrialization, so think about La Corco, now post-industrialization, we have construction industry. So PR, Puerto Rico, if you are on an airplane, you can see this like a huge urbanization, huge, especially in the coastal zone. That's the floating from now, and that is Puerto Rico. And people think, oh my God, it's developed. PR is developed. Puerto Rico is is very developed. Look at the construction, but look what happened now in 2017. That's the industry after post-industrialization. Construction was the main weight of, for the economy, and Cemento Ponce, which the owner was Ferré, the governor. The majority of the highways in Puerto Rico were made of Cemento Ponce, so they used the money. So when people say no, Ferré, he didn't get a penny from the people from the government, I say, oh yes. But what happened with the highways? They were constructed with Cemento Ponce, and he was the owner. Next. So now for the fourth stage that I divided. Now we have research and investigation. That's the modern thing that they want to introduce. But you see, Monsanto. So again, they are trying to make decisions how we are going to build our country. They did it in the industrialization era. They did it in the construction era. And now they are trying to do it with Monsanto. And Monsanto is there. And we need to do more educational forums about what's going on with Monsanto, what is that about. And not only Monsanto, other scientific areas that they are trying to develop right now. So those four areas are very important in terms of the social, economical process in Puerto Rico, but we didn't make the decision. The decision was made by the US government. So that's part of the colonialism. Next. So I put the picture, I change it, so I say, no, I need to show the people that all of them are part of this problem. All of them they were involved of the Peñuela situation right now. All of them were involved in different situations, in different struggles, environmental struggles that we still have it right now. 1994, this is specifically for Peñuelas. They decide to purge the electrical authority, Autoridad de Energía Eléctrica, as they call it, and the Applied Energy System of Puerto Rico. They signed to purchase a company. They give the contract to a company, and the contract is valid for 25 years. That happens in 1994, and I was in my second year of university, so years ago. I skipped all over years. During those years, they were fighting against the community. The community was very active. In our previous forum, we spoke about this. I showed the slide with a specific dates, a specific years, where the community were fighting against the Peñuelas, the AAS system in Puerto Rico. But they were successful sometimes. But at the end, the U.S. was the one who made the decisions, especially the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. 2003, after years of trying to figure out how to deal with the issues, they start transporting the issues to Arroyo Barril in República Dominicana. They send everything to Arroyo Barril. And it's very important to say that because they sent 27 tons of rock ash. After that, after a couple of years, 2007, the Arroyo Barril community, they won because they had a lot of situations in terms of health. And then, because they didn't want the ashes in Dominican Republic, what happened with those ashes? They're going back and they're gonna stay in Puerto Rico. So I don't know if this is clear. We have a company in Puerto Rico that make a decision to export the product that for me is not a product. It's something that is gonna, it's not good for our health. And they send it to Dominican Republic. That's awful. And that happens here with the garbage. That happens in different places. So they did that to Arroyo Barril. With that, now we have the ashes back. They changed the ashes and they mentioned that instead of ashes, they have a rock that is called agremax. And because it's a rock, it's not sediments, because are not sediments, they are together, they are compacted, cemented like sedimentary rocks. They are not gonna be dangerous to the population of Peñuelas, which is not true. 2010, at the end, they want to include not only Peñuelas, they want to put the ashes throwing the ashes in the landfill of Humacao. There are only 2 landfills in Puerto Rico that they accept the ashes, according to the federal government, according to the Environmental Protection Agency, which they're always playing and they're always throwing the ball to us. And they always say, okay, this is our laws. You can use our law or you can do a better law than us. Like, okay, make the decisions. We can follow whatever you make the decisions. But the government, they are not doing that. They are following what the federal government is saying. Like, they are the ones who know. But we have our scientists in Puerto Rico that say this is not good for us. This is not good for our south community or even the island because of different, the vientos alisios and all the movement of air in Puerto Rico. Next. That happened in 2010, and then we can skip 2012. EPA again, they say that agremax can release heavy concentrations of heavy metals. They contradict themselves. They say that they are good, and then they say they are not good. So now they say that there are some heavy concentrations of mercury and molybdenum and thallium and different heavy metals. And that goes to the soil and the bodies of water. And the worst thing that you can have cancer if you drink water that has heavy metals. That happened in 2012. But then 2013, they go back again to the court and the company won. So again, we are still, struggling with the fight. 2013, María de Lourdes Santiago, that's the senator she was the senator of the Partido Independentista. She was trying to do a law to prohibit. It didn't went through. The municipality of Peñuelas, their ordinance to prohibit. They have it, but they don't care. So it's like, okay, the municipality can have a law, but it doesn't matter because the state is the one who makes the decision, and after the state, the U.S. government. Next. October in 2016, the decision in 2016, very close to 2017 right now, we are right now, they are allowed to restart the ash deposit. Then in 2017, we have a new governor who is Ricardo Rosselló, and they sign a law saying the law to prohibit, look at the title of the law to prohibit the deposit and disposal of coal ash or coal combustion residues in Puerto Rico. Sounds that they are going to stop. But they didn't mention agremax. For them, ashes are the sediments, agremax is the rock. That's why they are pouring not the ashes, the agremax. So, July 2017, civil disobedience start again against put the ashes on the landfills in Peñuelas. This is a very quick, if I compare with the previous one, the timeline about Peñuelas. But what is important about Peñuelas is the common denominator. The U.S. government is the one who makes the decision at the end. We when people say they were not fighting since day one, yes, we have the evidence. We have the tons of paper of people going to the court fighting against this poison activity in Peñuelas. After Maria, they are saying that the mountain of ashes is there, the mountain of agremas is there. They say that they cover it. That is not true. They didn't do that. How they're going to cover a mountain? It's just, it doesn't make sense. So right now we have Maria, and for sure we have our whole island flooded with ashes of the Peñuelas landfill and the AS deposit. Next. So again, I just want to finish. I'm not going to finish. I'm going to open the floor if you want to have questions. How is this related with environmental colonialism? We were trying to show you how is this related with the colonialism. The fights, the environmental fights in Puerto Rico, the environmental struggle in Puerto Rico are completely related with our relationship with the United States. They make the decisions. Even though that they say that we have a local government, for sure we don't have it. You can see right now what's going on in the island. We don't have a local government. They are waiting for the federals, and that's why our people right now, after Maria, they are suffering. They don't have fuel for the hospital. They don't have gasoline for cars. They don't have water, even the electricity.